Greetings, Mr. Dave, and thank you for giving us the privilege of this interview to talk about all queries about the American school here in Bahrain.
My pleasure.
So thank you so much. So we're starting today and talking about how the pandemic has actually affected and impacted the entire institutions, and especially not leaving out the educational institution. So how would you say that ASB handled the pandemic today?
I mean, if I had to rank ourselves, I'd say we did quite well. We're in a unique position starting in 2020 as a brand new school. So all of our teachers were new to Bahrain.
Yep.
We actually completely planned the year in person and the year virtually. And so we spent quite a bit of time in August last year making sure that we were prepared, whether students were here, whether they're at home. I had, well, I guess you could call it a benefit of being through a pandemic before. I was the head of school in a school in Hong Kong during SARS, where we also had to send students home. Now, it was nothing like this. It was more isolated, but it was pretty significant in terms of having to really take a step back and do education differently. I was quite proud of our staff and our students and our parents, how they handled it, but it certainly had a pretty significant impact on us as a school.
That's nice. Okay, since you've mentioned the students and the impact, how sudden it was for everyone, and how like stay-at-home school was just all of a sudden like a decision between a day and the second. How did ASB handle on keeping these students positive, engaged, and not being affected like negatively?
Again, I wouldn't recommend anybody start a new school in the middle of a world pandemic. Or any business, I guess.
Oh, you've done it.
However, I actually think, and maybe this is just our own self-justification, but I think in many respects, we were better off than most. We have 20,000 square meters of space. And so students had been really cooped up for 6 months, 4 months at home. And it was all of a sudden, it was Tuesday night, the ministry made a decision. Wednesday, they're at home, and they were at home for 4 straight months. And for most people, because they were nervous, they stayed at home during the summer too. When we were able to open physically and in person, and about 95% of all of our students attended in person, we didn't have to do much to motivate them. They were so excited to be on campus. This is my 33rd year in education. I don't think I've ever seen such happy kids. We were also really fortunate that I think the teachers were just so excited to be in Bahrain, to be in physically, because they too were at home. And so I think that it was positive throughout the building. You know, my job is to find people, regardless of a pandemic, who motivate kids. And that really came to bear during the pandemic, how important that was, and how more important it was even in normal circumstances. So we were able to stay positive. We tried to normalize as much as you can. I mean, if you had fallen asleep for 6 months and woken up and saw people in this school wearing masks 1.5 meters apart, walking down you would think you're watching a science fiction movie. But we adapted. Kids adapt. It's adults that are maybe a little less resilient. Kids adapt very quickly, and they remained positive throughout the entire year. So it was, we felt that was the best way to motivate, by just staying positive.
Great. So maybe those 6 months actually prepared them for coming back to school and kept them like very positive about the situation.
Yeah, I really think it did. A good example of knowing that they were excited to be here is in September. As you know, in Bahrain, it's very warm.
Yes.
We told students, look, at break time, you don't have to go outside. I know it's hot. Every student went outside. They didn't care that it was hot. They were on the playground. They were in the field. They had to stay within their bubbles, their own grade bubbles, because they couldn't mix. But they were just so excited to be here in person. It really tells you that where students really want to be. I think 95% of kids would say, I want to be in school. I don't think I'd say that when I was in school, but certainly these kids.
Neither would I.
Yeah, these kids do.
I mean, today as parents, it actually amazes us, and we are very curious to know what has ASB put through their curriculum or their schedule, and in fueling the imagination and creativity with kids and amongst their students. What things do you take in these aspects?
Well, first, as the director of the school, the most important job, and it's a long way to the second most important, is hiring creative, passionate teachers that are excited to be around kids. And when I hire, having done international hiring for over 20 years, I look not just for qualified and experienced teachers, but I look for people with personalities that will fit what we're doing here. And that includes being creative and taking risks with their own teaching within reason, trying things and showing students that it's okay to fail, that they can try it and being creative. I often tell my teachers, if I ever see you teaching as I was taught, or even as you were taught, you're in the wrong school. In 2021, the skill set and the characteristics that kids need today are very different. Education in general is slow to adapt. The days of sitting in rows and the teacher talking and the kids just being vessels of knowledge and just spitting it back out in an exam are long gone. It doesn't mean you don't have high academic expectations, but we have STEAM labs and we have maker space areas where students can go in and they can be innovative and they can try things. And I learned to code last year with 5-year-olds. I learned on the floor and then on an iPad how to code. I had a 5-year-old showing me how to code. They take that whole innovation side and creative side. If we can do it properly, it's natural to them. It's not something new. It's something that they're comfortable with. And that's what's going to keep them engaged. And I know parents worry about how much screen time on an iPad or laptop, and we do have to monitor that. But there are so many ways to be engaging, and that's letting kids be curious, letting them be imaginative. Don't squish the curiosity out of them. I think schools traditionally do that, and by the time kids seem to love school at 3, 4, 5, 6, and if you squish the curiosity out, by grade 4 and 5, they're saying, do I have to go to school? So if you can create an environment where a student's upset because they can't go to school, or they're upset when school day ends, no matter what age, then you're doing something right. And that's a lot to do with being creative and imaginative.
So we'd like to keep them interested in coming to school until they're bigger enough.
So that when most of the kids in the younger years think they're just going to play all day. Yet there's a 10-month, very thought out, structured program that the teachers have, and they observe and they watch these kids. But that shouldn't disappear when they get to elementary school and middle school and high school. We want them still to come thinking this is it's a lot of fun to learn, and it's a lot of fun to challenge myself and not just give up, that you try things and you try them again. And I think the idea that if I'm a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old and I try something and it doesn't work, I just quit. Well, if you love what you're doing and it's interesting and the teacher's making it engaging, then that sense of learning to love learning becomes very natural.
So I've heard there's a concept here that you follow. It's called measuring happiness concept among students. We'd like to know about that more. Does it exactly say what happiness is about with students?
Well, I started using the term the smile index. I've sat on many panels with parents and educators. What makes a school successful? Is it university acceptances? Is it your IB diploma results? Is it how many students have over 90%? And those are all important. But if you don't have on a regular basis, if you could put a barometer, and this is subjective, of course, if you could put a barometer that measured the smile index in the school and it wasn't above 85 or 90 every day, then there's a problem. If it is, then everything else is going to come a lot more naturally. Academics is going to feel like something good to do and high expectations. If we were in normal times where we weren't wearing masks, where parents could come into the school at any time, visitors could come anytime, if people walked through the school, saw the classrooms, and didn't turn to me and say, whoa, what is going on here? There's this buzz in the air. If they don't say that, then I would be disappointed. And to me, it doesn't matter whether you're American curriculum, Canadian, British, IB, AP, any of those acronyms, you won't get to that level of success if you don't have a happy, engaged population in school. And that's kids and teachers. And I'm convinced that that is the key element to achieve everything else. You don't become successful and then that makes you happy. You are happy in your environment, which helps you become successful.
Nice. So aside from the measuring happiness, I know that holistic education is very important to parents. How has ASB approached that?
Yeah, I think in sort of the liberal arts tradition, in terms of a wide range of opportunities for students, whether they're 6 years old or 16, um, obviously academics and academic achievement is a priority, or maybe the priority, because the what we're dealing with in reality is when students graduate in grade 12, are they going to have ample opportunities to look at university, or by the time some of our students graduate for grade 12, they may well have skills to go right into a workforce, whether they're coders or it might not be university. But the majority of students are still looking at opportunities for university. Again, the days of literacy and numeracy being the key components and the only components are gone. Universities don't want mono-focused kids or uni-focused kids. They want kids who are interesting and interested. So within our schedule, students will have 3 phys eds a week. Up to grade 10. They'll all have music in grade 5 to 9. They are all part of a band. They will all learn a wind instrument between grade 5 to 9. That's part of their program. It's not an elective after school. It's part of their program because we want them. And if we have one student who develops a passion for music through that program, then we've done our job. I think there'd be a lot more than that. But we really need them to, and I think their core courses, their math, their science, their English, their social studies, geography, I think there's so much more relevance to all of that if you've got a well-rounded approach to what you're doing. And not all kids are pure academics. Yeah. The other side of that is, the really great athlete or the incredible musician that you want to pull that out of them, and they will for sure become better academic kids.
There is a field for everyone.
Absolutely.
And there is an opportunity for everyone. You talked about opportunities and how you give your students this broad experience to gain all this experience from academic skills, and even like physical, athletes, instrumental with music. Would you say that you prepare these students and these kids and this next generation to gain enough international exposure to understand their opportunities, not only in Bahrain, but even outside of Bahrain?
Yeah, I mean, certainly we have plans. We couldn't do it last year. Yeah. And as our students get older, their oldest will be grade 10, in a couple of areas. One, and this is common in a lot of schools, something like a week without walls, where you might be going to Nepal to volunteer for a week. You might do something to build waterways in Thailand. You might stay here regionally and support immigrant families who aren't getting the proper access to education. You might have students who work with them in a classroom. We also, because Esol is a part of a 10-school group, we've got schools in Egypt, in Abu Dhabi, in Lebanon, and Cyprus, and Hong Kong, Dubai. And so we have a natural feed for exchange opportunities. We might have a grade 9 student, or we might even say by grade 9, you need to do one term in one of these other schools, so that you're getting out of your comfort zone, that you're trying to find a different way to express yourself. Because again, I'm guessing that we're about 50% Bahraini in our school, and then 50% from all over the world. I'm guessing that a high percentage will go away to university, and a lot of the Bahraini students will come back, and they'll give back, and they'll work here. The more exposure we can give them internationally, and even giving them sort of an international mindedness, which the International Baccalaureate does a really good job of, the better we're going to prepare them. So there's a number of ways, and it could be grade 6 and 7s going to Abu Dhabi for the Model UN. It could be a sports team, the basketball team going to Hong Kong for an international tournament. There are just so many different, and those are the things that in 20 and 30 years, they're going to talk about. Exactly. I hate to tell my math and English teachers that they're going to remember what a soliloquy is and how they learn trigonometry. All important, but that's not the stuff they're remembering in 10 and
Yeah,
20 years.
of course. Like innovation, there's always space for innovation in the world. And I think exchange might help that. Exchange students, exchange workers, like the idea of exchange between countries and
Right.
the fields and everything, that would bring great innovation to different countries, not only in Bahrain.
Yes, definitely.
You talked about educators earlier, and you said that you wouldn't like for educators to be very extreme and very focused on the way you were educated. For today, if we're going to describe these educators at ASB, how would you describe them?
I would describe they need to be thinkers. They need to not come with a suitcase of lesson plans that have worked for 20 years. It's okay to take some of that, but they need to be, as I said earlier, they need to fit a personality puzzle. Again, that means loving what they do, being passionate about. Kids will read into that very quickly, but they also need to be understanding. And this takes a lot of people out of their comfort zone. And when I first discussed this with the new staff last year, who came from 11 different countries, when I said, I want you to take risks, I want you to be okay with doing a lesson and being creative with it and it flopping completely and realizing that didn't work, that was a mistake. And understanding that as the director and my principal, Steve, that we're going to support you. You figure out what went wrong, you try it again, because you need to move away from the safety net. And it's easy. It would be easy for me to tell parents in front of parents, say, we are going to really focus on math and English and those skills around that. Our teachers are going to be here for 2 hours of tutoring after school every day. We're going to make sure we get all the basics in. And some parents would be very happy because that's sort of the comfort zone that we grew up with. But that's not what students need. And we don't throw out the cumulative skills that they do need. But these teachers need to be creative. They need to try things and work on things a little bit differently and be able to take a step back and understand they're going to be supported if they try some new things. Because again, teaching like maybe in the 1950s, or in some cases 2021, is not acceptable. And it's parents in international schools pay a lot of money for their kids' tuition, and they deserve teachers who are taking that extra step. We're not going to be satisfied with the status quo.
Of course. I mean, the world is changing, and we have to change the education of our kids today.
Yeah.
When we went to school, we were expected to learn the alphabets at school, but today children are expected to know the alphabets before going into school.
Right.
Having that aside, we've also mentioned that 50% of your students are Bahrainis and 50% come from all over the world. I mean, it is a definite concern for each parent that their kids might go to school, a specific school that would follow a certain curriculum, and they might forget about their culture or their linguistics and things like that, their language, their main things that they need to follow. How does ASB today make sure that this doesn't happen?
That would be one of the two most asked questions from parents. For the first
Definitely.
6 months before we opened is, what are your tuition fees? The second most was, we're from Bahrain, our family's from here, or the region.
Yeah.
We could go to a national school, we could go to a local school where 97% of the kids are Bahraini. There's a feel that you're part of that culture. There's in some schools where they might be fully Arabic for the first 2 or 3 years and then transition into English and Arabic. One of the mistakes I think international schools make when it comes to second language, and I experienced this my time in Hong Kong with the Chinese language, is parents are just so incredibly passionate about their mother tongue and the culture and the concern about the loss of that if they're in an international school. So we are making a concerted effort that our goal is to be a world-class international school, and an international school that values highly Arabic culture and language. For instance, our head of Arabic language and culture has been working the last couple of weeks. We've got an area of the school that will now be the Arabic language and culture hub. So often a second language class, you might go into that grade 3 class and the Arabic teacher comes in there and she or he teaches you Arabic and you learn. And then she leaves and it doesn't feel very Arabic, it doesn't feel very cultural. So we will physically move 90% of all our Arabic teachers into an area where when you walk down the hall, you think you're walking into the Bahrain Museum, and it's got historical, like we have in the hallway here, historical information. Even we've reassessed how the amount of time we give to Arabic language. From about grade 3, we'll actually have more Arabic language taught than the national schools. Now, we don't do fully Arabic from pre-K to grade 2. However, even pre-K and KG1, it's not required here, but those students have Arabic every single day. By grades KG2 to grade 2 or 3, they'll have 7 classes a week and then 5 to 6 classes after that. So we're taking it seriously because we know how important it is to parents. But also, as a Canadian working in an American school in Bahrain, we're educationally guests in somebody else's country. We have an American or North American approach. Our curriculum, for the most part, is American. But we're in Bahrain, we're in the Middle East. If we didn't allow all students to have exposure to the language and significant exposure to the culture, I don't think we'd be doing our kids a good service. And so it's really important to us.
Of course it's important. And I mean, everything we've mentioned today is definitely important. And I'm sure that every parent listening to this interview would be absolutely happy. We've had a very productive conversation. But the last thing I want to ask you, Mr. Dave, today is, how does ASB today, what kind of prospects does it present to its students to keep them currently and ongoing connected to universities after they graduate from ASB?
Another often asked question, even from parents of 5 and 6-year-olds, because that's sort of the end result is what's going to happen to my child if my daughter goes to this school and starts in grade 2 and goes till grade 12, what opportunities will they have? Again, we've got the unique, privilege to be part of a group of schools, 10 schools that have been, Mr. Abashakra, who started Esol Education 45 years ago, they've had students graduating and literally going to every university. Well, maybe not every university, but most universities around the world. So we've got 40 years of graduating students going to schools in Canada, Europe, the UK, the US. And so we've got lots of experience, and there's a wealth of knowledge and expertise that we can tap into from these other schools. At the end of the day, what good universities want are great students and great people. And so if we can, from an academic side, prepare them, but also prepare that well-roundedness and people who are coming out with great ethics and great character, we think the sky is the limit. It really is. They're going to graduate either with a full IB diploma or IB certificate courses and an American high school diploma. There's sometimes a misunderstanding that if you go to an American school as a student, you go to American university. If you go to a British school, you go to a British university. Universities don't care. They want good kids and good students. Whether you're an American school going to a British school, there's a school here in Bahrain that is an American-based curriculum. 84% of their kids go to a British school, and they're good kids and they're good students. And so we hope that we prepare them well as people, and that their academics prove that they're going to get every opportunity possible to them when they graduate.
I'm sure that the mothers and fathers' generation, the parents' generation today are well aware of how important education is, and today they understand that this education is the first investment they put in their kids. And I'm sure that listening to this interview, knowing about all this information you've told us today, and filling all these inquiries that we had and questions would make them understand that this is an amazing school and would give their kids an amazing future. And there are a lot of opportunities for creativity and for innovation. So thank you so much for giving us the time and giving us these answers to these questions.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.